Good morning. Second, first year become computer applications semester 2. First year become computer applications semester 2, programming in C and C++. Similarly, first year become first year BA computer applications semester 1. First year BA computer applications semester 1, programming in C. So today's topic is arrays. Array is an essay type question. Arrays is an essay type question, compulsory essay type question. There are many others are also there. We will discuss one by one. Arrays, structures, strings, like that. We discuss all these things. This is a revision class. So today we discuss about arrays. What is an array? What is the definition of array? How to create arrays in C? What are the different types of arrays? One-dimensional array, two-dimensional array. How to initialize arrays? How to use arrays in C programs? All these things we may discuss here. So this is the PPT. So we start with the array basics, arrays, like that. So what is an array? An array is a single name for a collection of data values, all of the same data type. Subscript notation to identify one of the values. A carry over from earlier programming languages, more than a primitive type, less than an object. Like objects, when used as a method parameters and return types, do not have or use inheritance, accessing each of the values in an array. So generally, what is the definition of an array? An array is a collection of similar data type. An array is a collection of similar data type which are stored in continuous memory locations with a single name, and generally the data elements, or the data inside an array is of same type or similar type, used like integer, char, strings, real, double, like that. Generally, to access the data members, to access the data from an array, we may use subscript notation. It is called as subscript notation or index notation. So generally, the concept of array is almost all same for C and C++, and generally it is more than a primary data type or a primitive type and less than an object. So how to create arrays in C or C++? So this is the C notation, C++ notation or syntax. So base type is equals to, generally in C it is like int some array name, So these are the different types of arrays. Three ways to use. Generally we may use square brackets. Generally we may use square brackets with array name. Square brackets are used to initialize arrays in C, create and initialize arrays in C and C++. So this is the example of using arrays in with some integer data type. So example is int some space array name within brackets some size. So syntax is int space some array name within brackets some maximum size of the array. So this PPT explains about arrays in C++ notation or syntax. So here is another example. Some pressure is equals to new space int of 100, like that. So we may use different terms or terminology in arrays. Generally we may use different terms and terminology. That is array name and maximum size of the array, subscript or index values, array boundaries and array values like that. So what is array name? Array name is a name used to create any array in C or C++. Maximum, next is maximum size of the array. So every array has a array name and maximum size of the array and array boundaries, lower boundary and upper boundaries, and some variables called as index or index values. Some variable called as index value. Index value is generally used to retrieve the elements index value by using subscript value or index value. By using subscript value or index value, we may retrieve or get the data elements or data from an array. So and similarly every array have some boundaries also, like lower bound and upper bounds, lower boundary and upper boundary. So array length, how to find out array length means specified by the number in brackets when created with new. So generally the maximum size of the array or array length is specified within the square brackets. So for example, int space a of 10 means here int is the data type of the array, a is the array name or name of the array, within brackets means the maximum size of the array. So subscripts, what are subscripts and subscript ranges? Generally a subscript is subscript or index value. Generally subscript or index values are used to retrieve or get the array elements or arrays from the arrays. By using subscripts only or index values only, we may get or retrieve the data from the array. All the subscripts are generally begins or starts from 0. All the subscript values are begins from 0 to n minus 1, where n is the maximum size of the array. All the subscript values are generally start with 0 or begins with 0 to n minus 1, where n is the maximum size of the array. So for example, int a of 5 means it is a one dimensional array or a single dimensional array with 5 elements, and the subscripts values are generally running from 0 to n minus 1. Subscript values are generally running from 0 to n minus 1, where n is the maximum size of the array, that is 5. So 0 to 4. So the subscript values are generally runs from 0 to 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Total 5 values. So 5 is the maximum size of the array. So how to get or how to retrieve or how to access the values from an array means by using array name within brackets some subscript value or some script value. So for example, a of 1, a of 0 is the first value of the array, a of 1 is the second value of the array, a of 2 is the third value of the array, a of 3 is the fourth value of the array, and a of 5 is the a of 4 is the last value or fifth value of the array. So this is the example of using or creating an array, a single dimensional array with integer type with 5 elements. So basically arrays are of two types. One is one dimensional arrays, and second one is called as two dimensional arrays. First type is called as one dimensional arrays, and second type is called as two dimensional array. So subscript out of range, and every array in C or C++, every array in C or C++ have some boundaries in it. So the subscript or the index values are generally starting from 0 to n minus 1, where n is the maximum size of the array. If you try to get beyond this value range, if you try to get values beyond this range, that is a of minus 1 or a of minus 2 or a of minus 3 or a of 4, a of 5, a of 6, that means we are trying to access the array elements beyond its subscripts, that is we are crossing the lower boundaries and upper boundaries, so that it is called as an error, subscript out of range error. Subscript out of range error or error, generally it is called as an error. So arrays are two types. Arrays are basically two types: single dimensional or one dimensional arrays, and second one is called as two dimensional array or matrix. Arrays are basically of two types. One is called as single dimensional arrays or one dimensional arrays. Second one is called as two dimensional arrays or arrays matrix. So single dimensional arrays have only one subscript or one index value, and these values are generally stored in continuous manner, and these values, the values inside a single dimensional, are generally stored in a continuous location or a continuous manner, one after another, and we may retrieve the data or information from the array by using some subscript values. So next one is for example for single dimensional arrays, int a of 10 or int a of 5, like that. So in the single dimensional arrays, the values or the data or the values are generally stored in continuous memory locations. For example, the first value is stored, assume that first value is stored at 1001, then second value will be stored at 1002, third one will be stored at 1003, like that. So so how to initialize arrays in a loop, or how to initialize arrays in C or C++. So by using subscript value and array name, by using array name and subscript value, we may initialize means assigning some value to an array element, for example int I, here next is int a of 10. After that, for I is equals to 0, I is less than some 10, I plus plus a of I is equals to 0. Here is the int is the data name, and I is the subscript or some subscript or index value. 10 is the maximum size of the array. A of I is the element. Which we can access it from an array. Similarly, other type of elements, other type of arrays is called as two-dimensional arrays. So what is a two-dimensional array? Two-dimensional arrays are generally called as some matrices or matrix. In two-dimensional arrays, we may use two values, or the first row value and column value. Why? Because a two-dimensional array is nothing but it is a matrix. Generally in a matrix notation, we have some rows and columns, and here to create a two-dimensional array or matrix, we may use two subscripts or index values. First one is called as rows, and second one is called as columns. So in two-dimensional arrays, we may generally use two values, row index or row subscript, and column index or column value. So for example, int a of 3 comma 3. Another example is int a of 3 comma 3, int a of 3 comma 3 is an example, simple example of a two-dimensional matrix. To create a matrix or a two-dimensional array with 3 rows and 3 columns. Here we use one subscript for row and one subscript for column. So here we may use two variables I and j. So by so 3 int a of 3 by 3 means there are totally 3 into 3 9 elements are used in a matrix. 9 elements are used in a matrix. So how to get or access the elements from an array means by using simple example is a of I comma j. Example is a of I comma j. Example is simple example is a of I comma j, or a of 0 comma 0, or 0 comma 1, 0 comma 2, a of 0 comma 0, 2 comma 2, like that. Thank you.